Okay, let's open up to page 466. Lesson 1, Basic Economics Concepts. Let's look at the key ideals, our learning objectives. Businesses utilize capital, labor, and materials to create goods and services to sell. Markets are systems that bring sellers goods and services to buyers. The prices of goods and services are determined in part by supply and demand. Let's look at the top of the page at the first paragraph, and please follow along in your book. In economics, capital is a term for things that can produce income. Money can be capital, so can equipment, land, and buildings. Businesses invest capital in order to create goods and services to sell for profit. However, capital by itself cannot create value. Labor, the work of human beings, transformed capital and materials into goods and services that can be sold. Let's look at the slide that we have. Let's go ahead and move it up. So here's some additional information about economics. We defined it for you. And then they show you the two categories of economics. And mainly we'll be discussing, for the purpose of you taking the GED test and passing, we will be discussing microeconomics. And I know people want to get into, maybe want to ask the question, what's the difference? Well, I don't want to get into a long, extensive explanation, but microeconomics deal with smaller entities in an economy, whereas macro deal with bigger, larger things like taxes and so forth, and unemployment. Okay, let's move the slide up. So they show the circular flow of economic activity, how economic activity flows through a market economy. We live in a market economy. Okay, so maybe here I may want to mention that as we were discussing in class, when you start talking about economics and goods and services, you have to mention the factors, and most people call it the 4 factors of production. And I mention it because I see it here on this slide: land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurship. So anytime a product comes to market, there are 4 things that go into getting that product there. The land, where you operate; the capital, not necessarily capital meaning money. In this case, we're talking about capital goods, equipment, tools used to perform the work. Then labor, someone has to do the work. That's a factor that goes in producing the product or service, bringing it to market. If you don't hire anyone, of course, then you would have to do it yourself. That still counts as labor. And then the 4th factor to get a product or business to market is entrepreneurship. That is the individual, a person who is the risk taker. They're going to bring the other 3 factors together to produce the product and get it to market or service. So 4 factors of production is really important. In other words, how do we produce things? What is this production process? Well, you have to put those 4 things together. Now, I also want to mention something here before we move to the second paragraph in your book. This study of economics, I've heard some people describe it as one word: scarcity. So economics in a market economy. It can be explained down to one term: scarcity, meaning that people are trying to satisfy unlimited wants and needs with limited resources, and everyone cannot have all the things that they want because we have unlimited resources. Okay, so this term of scarcity, you'll see it keep coming up as we study economics. Now, there are three types of economic systems that people normally discuss when they're explaining microeconomics. One, a market economy. Two, command economy. And three, a traditional economy. So the market economy is one in which the what, how, and for whom things are to be produced are answered. Those decisions are made by the individual, the consumer, and the business owners. Now, that's a little different in a command economy. See, every type of economy has to answer those three basic economic questions: what, how, and for whom things are going to be produced. So in a command economy, communist system, or economy controlled by one individual like a dictatorship, the what, how, and for whom things are going to be produced, those decisions are answered by the dictator or the central government themselves. Okay, they decide what will be produced and how and for whom. Now, in a traditional economy, the third type of economic system, the what, how, and for whom things are going to be produced is based on rituals, customs, and habits. And these rituals, customs, and habits dictate and determine what will happen in that economic system. For an example, if you live in the rainforest, like some people live in traditional economy in the Philadelphia area in the United States, or the Aborigines living in the forest. Well, for those type of economies, when you start asking, as I grow up from a child, what am I going to do? Well, you're going to do whatever has been done traditionally according to rituals, customs, and habits, because it's a traditional economy. And those decisions are made based on the rituals, the customs, and habits. Like the Amish in our country, they have almost a different economy within our economy. So those are the three basic type of economic systems, and we're discussing microeconomics. Let's pull up to the next slide. Here we are, scarcity. We just discussed this. The whole concept in the discussion, some say in economics, can be boiled down to the discussion of scarcity. People having unlimited wants and desires, and they're trying to satisfy that with limited resources. So let's go ahead and move it up. And there are the three basic economic questions that each society must answer. Okay, let's go ahead and scroll it up a little bit more. Now, before we play this video on what is economics, I want to turn your attention back to the textbook. Let's look at the second paragraph before we play this, okay? For example, a business that makes computers must make capital investments to build a factory and install equipment for production. Then the business must hire workers and managers to run the plant to use the equipment. The business must also buy the materials and parts to build the computers. The materials and parts are producer goods, while the finished computers, ready to sell in stores, are consumer goods. So they make a distinction here between producer goods and the end user, consumer goods. Not all businesses make or build objects. Some businesses create value by selling intangible services to their customers, such as an employment agency that offers the service of matching people with jobs, or even a lawyer that provides a service. So our economy is made up of both physical, tangible merchandise and products that are produced, and the service industry, intangible things that give people value that is sold. So when we say tangible, those are physical products and merchandise that you can touch, whereas these intangible services, we can't touch them, but we certainly derive benefit from the lawyer's advice, the financial advisor advice. That's a service business. Let's go ahead and look at the video on what is economics.
Okay, so what is economics? Economics starts with the word scarcity. But what is scarcity? Scarcity is the idea that we cannot have everything we want. As much as we'd like to have, there are limits that keep us from having everything. What are these limits? Scarce resources. Why are these resources scarce? Because they're hard to find. Money is a great example. Let's say you want a phone and a laptop, but you don't have enough money to buy both. You're forced to choose between the two. Even if you have enough money to buy both, you'll still have to choose between buying those things or buying other stuff. What I'm trying to say is that you can never have enough money, which makes it a scarce resource. Time is another scarce resource. Suppose you need to work, but you also want to play on your Xbox. You can go to work, or you can play video games, but you can't do both at the same time. Of course, you can do one after the other, but there's only 24 hours in a day. By doing one thing, you'll have to cut another thing from your schedule. So, what is economics? Economics is a study of how people make decisions, given the resources, scarce resources, that are provided to them. But it's not just about people. It's also how businesses and governments make decisions as well. Economics is a study of how our society as a whole uses its resources.
Okay, so let's look at the next paragraph in your book. Markets. Markets are established routines and networks for selling and buying goods and services. There are producer markets for producer goods. There are retail and wholesale markets for consumer goods. There are markets for raw materials such as minerals. There are financial markets for selling stocks and bonds. Some markets are more highly organized than others, and all markets are regulated by law to some extent. But markets, by definition, are not completely under the control of any government or agency. So with the market, a market can be anywhere that buyers and sellers come together for an exchange, buy and sell. That's a market. eBay is a market. If you're selling on YouTube or Amazon, it's a marketplace. Okay? Let's scroll down on the slides. And we've discussed this, but we're going to pull the slide up anyway. So the factors of production, we talked about it. Let's bring this back up to 100%. And so we've already discussed the 4 factors of production. Okay, let's slide it up a little. Okay, and so we want to go ahead and show you the video that we have on the factors of production. Let's go ahead and move the slide up.
Michael Lima, your study room is ready.
Okay, and let's play the video.
Economic term describing the general inputs used to produce goods and services to make a profit. Under the classical view of economics, the factors of production consist of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Land refers to the land itself as well as the raw materials that come from the land. This includes timber, coal, precious minerals such as gold and water. It can also mean the physical area on which a factory sits. Labor refers to the workers who answer the phones, lift the pallets, drive the trucks, push the paperwork, and do all things physical and intellectual to keep a business running. Capital refers to the buildings, machines, and tools used in the process of production. Capital is anything from a fleet of delivery trucks, to a factory building, to a printing press, or a computer. Intellectual capital is defined as the technological expertise a business acquires over time, its trade secrets, and unique business processes. There is also social capital, the ability to operate because society has agreed to a system of order, conduct, and law. These elements facilitate an economic environment that allows the business to operate. Finally, entrepreneurship is the factor of production that ties the other three together. The entrepreneur provides innovation and creativity in the use of the other factors, which helps create a profitable business. For simplicity and analytic purposes, economists and analysts usually focus attention on two main factors, capital and labor. The relationship of both these factors and a company's output is referred to as the production function.
Okay, let's move up to the next slide. And we're going to make this a little larger. Make the screen bigger. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we mentioned this also, consumer goods and producer goods. Let's go ahead and move up to the next slide. And let's go ahead and play a video on the consumer and producer goods.
What do you know about a consumer, producer, goods and services? A consumer is a person who purchases goods and services for personal use. A consumer is an individual who buys products or services for personal use and not for manufacture or resale. Consumers make the decision whether or not to purchase an item at the store. A producer is a person, company, or country that makes, grows, or supplies goods or commodities for sale. Producers are very important in an economic system. They are the ones who make the goods and services that are sold in the economy. A good is a commodity, or a physical tangible item that satisfies some human want or need, or something that people find useful or desirable and make an effort to acquire it. Goods are material items that can be seen, touched, or felt and are ready for sale to the customers. Goods can be returned and can be stored for use in the future or multiple use. A service is an intangible process that cannot be weighed or measured. Services are actions by people or an activity of performing work for others. Services are amenities, facilities, benefits or help provided by other people. Services cannot be returned back once they are provided, and services cannot be stored for future use. Without consumers to purchase the goods, there would be no demand for the goods. Through the consumer's purchasing power, the entire notion of business is accomplished. Without consumers, the important aspect of the exchange of goods and services would be lacking.
Okay, let's turn our attention back to the textbook. Let's look at the next paragraph. Goods and services, and we're on page 466. Goods and services are distributed through markets so that they can be consumed where they are wanted. Through the market system, sellers and buyers negotiate prices and contracts. Now, the market system is the type of economy that we live in the U.S. We have a market economy, sometimes referred to as a free enterprise system. Let's continue. Buyers want to spend as little as possible. No, it's the paragraph before that. My apologies. It says, for example, a computer manufacturer might enter the consumer electronics market, competing with other manufacturers to sell its goods at a fair price to retailers. The retailers negotiate contracts specifying how many computers they are willing to buy and distribute to consumers through their stores or catalogs. How are prices determined? Next paragraph. How are they determined in the market system? In economics, price is related to supply and demand. Sellers need to earn money on the goods they have produced. Buyers want to spend as little as possible. When the supply of something is large, buyers shop around looking for the best price. And sellers lower their prices in order to move their inventory. On the other hand, if a product is scarce, meaning it's not a lot, not plentiful, buyers are less able to shop around, and sellers can raise their prices. Buyers in Florida, when Florida has a hard freeze and fruit growers lose their citrus crops, the price of oranges goes up. That is because there are fewer oranges to buy and fewer sellers to buy them from. So those sellers can charge more. Now, what they're discussing here is supply and demand, and to help you understand it, you should understand the law of demand and the law of supply. So here, and of course, we'll state it here, and I may even have it somewhere in this presentation, but if not, just pull it up and research it online. So demand, when we're talking about demand, they define demand as having the desire, three things that constitutes demand. Just saying I want something or I want to buy something, that's not economic demand. But demand is this, these three things: having the desire, the ability, and the willingness to make the purchase. That's economic demand. Having the desire to have it, the ability to pay for it, and the willingness to go and take your money and actually purchase it. That's economic demand. So the law of demand states this: demand of an economic product varies inversely with its price. So when price is up, demand is down, and vice versa. So there's another way to express that in probably easier to understand terms: the law of demand. And that is, when prices are high, people buy less. When prices are low, people buy more. That is absolutely the same thing as the technical expression of demand. It means exactly the same thing. It's saying that in whatever direction the price is, demand goes in the opposite. You see, prices are high, what? The opposite. People buy less. When prices are low, the opposite. People buy more. Now, let's look at supply. Supply is the business owners making products available, right? And so the law of supply states that supply follows the price, or supply varies with the price. And what that means is, unlike demand going in the opposite direction of price, the supply will follow the price in the same direction. So when prices are high, more is supplied, and suppliers supply less at what? Lower prices. That's the law of supply. Suppliers supply more at higher prices. You're willing to pay a higher price for that luxury car versus a domestic car, then suppliers are going to continue to supply those. So suppliers will supply more at higher prices and supply less at lower price, the law of supply. Let's look at the last paragraph in your book, the bottom of page 466. And then we have some additional slides we want to share with you. Supply and demand most clearly influence price in a free market economy. The U.S. economy operates primarily, but not completely, as a free market. For example, governmental price supports ensure that farmers can sell certain agricultural products at prices that allow them to earn a profit. So that concludes our overview in the textbook, but let's look back at the slides and let's move it up. Okay, so retail market versus wholesale market. We have a graphic here for you and some further definitions and explanations. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and move it up, of course, because you can pause and fast forward as you need. So let's move it up. Okay, let's move it up to the next slide. Wholesale versus retail. And I had, when we mentioned this in class, some of the students said, so what is wholesale where you buy in bulk? Well, sometimes, yes, it is. Usually, I would think one would want to buy large quantities because you're going to get a better deal in bulk. But wholesale is also buying at a price that's privileged to you as a business, less than what retailers pay. You're purchasing wholesale so you can sell it to the consumer at a retail price. Okay, let's go ahead and move it up to the next slide. Okay, and here, raw materials, the different types of raw materials. Okay, let's go ahead and slide it up to the next, just a little bit. Okay, there we are. Okay, and we're going to move it up. Goods are the physical objects, while services is an activity of performing work for others. And we gave some examples of it, like the lawyer performs a service. So we made the distinction in our discussion about between goods and services, that goods and products are physical things. They are referred to as tangible items, things that you can actually touch, whereas services are intangible. Okay, let's move it up a little. Okay, and let's move this slide up a little bit more. Okay, let's move up to the next slide. Goods and services, and we have a video we're going to play for you here.
When you grow up, there are a lot of different jobs you can do. People can pay you to fly planes, build buildings, bake cakes, or be a doctor. You can also sell things to people, such as cars, clothes, books, or even pets. The first group of things are services. The second group of things are goods. So, what is the difference between goods and services? Goods are things that you can touch, feel, and take home with you. If you buy a good, you then own it. Services are things other people do for you, which you pay them for. If you get a haircut, that is a service because you are paying the hairdresser to cut your hair. If you pay a bus driver to take you somewhere, that's also a service. You can't touch a bus ride or take it home with you. A bus ride is a service, not a good. Let's look at some more examples. Every day in Shopville, people are buying goods and services. Let's look at some of the things they buy. Your teacher will pause the video and you can guess which ones are goods and which ones are services. Remember, goods are the things that you can touch, feel, and take home with you. Services are things that you pay people to do for you. Okay, here we go. This is Jenkins. Today, he went to the shops and bought some clothes, some books, and got his bike fixed. Which of these are goods and which of these are services? Why don't you pause now and figure out which one is which? Great job! Clothes and books are goods because they are things that you can take home with you. Getting your bike fixed is a service because Jenkins paid the repairman to do something for him. Now let's see what Sally is doing in Shopville today. Today, Sally went to the post office and paid for a letter to be delivered. She also had lunch at a restaurant and bought a new TV. Which of these things are goods and which are services? Why don't you see if you can work out which of those things are goods and services? Well done! Sally paid for 2 services today. Mailing the letter was one service, and the other service was lunch. She paid the people at the post office to mail her letter, and she paid the people at the restaurant to cook her lunch. She also bought a TV, and this is a good, because she could take it home with her. So remember, goods are things that you can touch, feel, and take home with you at the end of the day. Services are things you pay other people to do for you.
Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Move the slide up. And here's some information about supply and demand in economics. Okay, let's go ahead and move the slide up. And let's move it up to the next slide. Okay, supply and demand relationship. Okay, let's move it up just a little. Another slide here, illustrating supply and demand. And again, this particular slide is illustrating the supply and demand relationship. Okay, let's move it up to the next slide. Supply and demand video. So let's go ahead and show this video.
Hi, it's Wala, and I work here at the IMF. Here's a quick fact you didn't know about me though. I love blueberries. Blueberry muffins, blueberry pie, blueberry scones, anything blueberry. But what does this have to do with economics? Woo! So, I go to the grocery store to buy blueberries. The lower the price, the more I'm inclined to buy. Maybe 2 boxes instead of 1. That's the law of demand. The lower the price, the more you demand. Now, let's say I'm a farmer and I grow and sell blueberries. Well, for a seller, it's the opposite. The higher the price, the more blueberries you want to supply and sell, because the more money you can make. That's the law of supply. The higher the price, the more you supply. Now, where these 2 lines intersect is our equilibrium price, or market price. That's the price I pay to buy my delicious blueberries. So far, simple, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. What if there's a new report that shows that blueberries are even better for your health than you thought? Now, at the same price, we want more blueberries, so the demand has gone up. Now, the entire curve shifts to the right because at any price, people want more blueberries than before. And what if really bad weather destroys some of the blueberry crop? Now, at every price, farmers will supply less, and the entire curve shifts to the left, and the equilibrium price increases. So now, only the people who can afford really expensive blueberries buy them. The rest of us switch to grapes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move up to the next slide. Okay, so the free market economy, we discussed that. We present some additional information here. Okay, let's go ahead and slide it up a little. See if we make that's a little larger. Okay. There you go. Okay, and we're going to move it up to the next slide. So we have a video we want to play here, and we'll play them, and we should be concluding shortly. So let's play the video.
Free market refers to an economy where the government imposes few or no restrictions and regulations on buyers and sellers. In a free market, participants determine what products are produced, how, when, and where they are made, to whom they are offered, and at what price, all based on supply and demand. A purely free market does not exist because all countries choose to impose some level of central decisions and regulations. For example, many countries forbid producers from polluting, pricing below cost, or being a monopoly. In addition, they often require minimum safety standards, disclosure of ingredients, licensing of certain professionals, and protection of original ideas, to name just a few. Many governments also control money supply to minimize the negative effects of natural economic expansion and contraction. Free market can also be more of a subjective term. In Western democracies, governments that are elected by citizens pass regulations. Therefore, these regulations protect a majority of citizens and reflect their values. These markets feel free to most of the citizens, even when they are highly regulated. In autocratic governments, non-elected governments impose major market decisions. These rules tend to feel oppressive, even if there may be fewer overall regulations. The pros and cons of a free market are subject to debate all over the world, and are one of the major dividing lines between capitalist and communist economies.
So this will conclude our lesson on page 466, lesson 1, basic economics concepts. We will stop here.